Quick disclaimer, I do swear an awful lot, and this is going to be an age-restricted video. If you're unhappy with this, please don some headphones, make sure that it's nice and private, that no one is listening in, and if you don't like swearing, you're free to click off this video. The Eland. A majestic animal, notably the largest antelope in Africa, with its distinctive humped back, twisted horns, beautiful blue-grey coat during the mating season, as well as its ability to blow a hole in the back of a Soviet T-54 the size of your fist with its hump-mounted, Panhard AML turret boasting a 90mm cannon. The Eland 90 is by far one of the most versatile vehicles the SADF ever adopted and one of my personal favorite military vehicles. Surprisingly, the Eland series is not originally an indigenous vehicle, at least not the Mark 1s. The Eland started out life as a Panhard AML-60, a French reconnaissance armored vehicle. The early 1960s saw a possible counterinsurgency operation, COINOPS for short, or a bush war in the near future, and the South African government wanted to secure a vehicle capable of operating in the multitude of conditions that the African landscape provided. The original Panhard AML series was selected, though the South African government wanted something a bit better. Considering that in its current state, the AML-60 was only slightly better than the then in-service Ferret Armoured Car. Panhard obliged and modified the AML with a larger turret and stronger turret ring to incorporate a defer 90mm low-pressure, quick-firing gun. South Africa, now pleased with this, ordered 100 AMLs, with spares for another 800, including engines, turrets, and additional parts to make more locally. Though the SADF quickly found that importing all these parts under mounting international pressure against the current government was proving difficult, to say the least. The South African government, henceforth known as the SAG, asked for several local companies to produce the AML under its new designation, the Eland 90 and the Eland 60. While the new Eland series were good, it wasn't quite well suited to the conditions the Southern African climates provided. Crews often found the Eland breaking down from the intense heat and dusty conditions. The SAG asked for several local companies to modify the armoured car to not be quite so shit. One of these companies, Sandok Oosterwel, was one of the major military manufacturers at the time and produced several prototypes that were rejected, with modifications being asked for. These batches of Elands had improvements in several iterations. Notably, the Mark II had an improved steering system, and the Mark III had better brakes, and both had received a custom fuel system, with the electric clutches being replaced by hydraulics on the Mark IV. In total, there were three main iterations of the Eland. The Eland 90, originally with a French Defer D921 90mm cannon, but later changed to a locally produced Denel GT-2 90mm main gun with a non-stabilized optical fire control system. The Eland 60 with a breech-loading Hotchkiss Brandt CM60A1 60mm mortar that was manufactured under license as the Model K1, which can also be used in a direct fire mode should the vehicle come under threat. And the Eland 20 with a 20mm GI-2 cannon designed mainly for export. It was marketed towards Morocco, but it was also sold to Ireland. While the guns certainly changed between models, all Elands came with a set number of features. The engine, originally a Panhard 1.99-litre flat-4 air-cooled engine, was replaced by the Mark V's 2.5-litre straight-4 water-cooled engine that drove a 6-speed constant mesh transmission. It was able to propel the 6-ton armoured car up to 100 km an hour on flat ground. Over the course of these iterations, the internals of the Eland were gradually replaced from French imported to SA produced parts, leading to the Eland becoming an indigenously produced vehicle. As mentioned previously, the new water-cooled engine gave the Eland series the ability to traverse up to distances of 450 kilometers without the need to refuel. References do differ on how accurate this is though, but is generally accepted to be around the 400 kilometer mark for road use. Despite the weight of the vehicle, the engine was incredibly fuel efficient, able to achieve up to 18 liters per 100 kilometers on an average consumption, though it should be noted that this fuel efficiency would be severely handicapped when it was in the bush. This range could also be extended using jerrycan, jerrycans in English. Added to this, the vehicle had much larger wheels, aided by a full-time 4x4 drive with active trailing arms. The Eland series was quite well liked by their crews, able to speed in and out of combat if the crew ever found themselves outgunned or outnumbered. Though, let's be honest, these are Afrikaners we're talking about. Mad lads that are stubborn as a water buffalo and quick to ire like a rhino. Bokop, which translates from Afrikaans to buckhead, was an affectionate term to describe the SADF infantry. As well as Bokop stel jou op fok, the buckheads will fuck you up. Later shortened to Bokop fokop, buckhead fuck up. With this in mind, it's not all that hard to see why the Elands routinely took on much larger and much more dangerous monsters than itself, and often survived and won. The Elands were originally ridiculed by the infantry as noddy cars, after the popular TV show Noddy in Toyland, as well as its tendency to rock to and fro after firing. Though this name would quickly be seen as an affectionate term by the crews, it's less an intimidating presence juxtaposed by its kill count. An interesting feature of the Eland is the weird multi-hold bull bar mounted at the front of the vehicle, commonly seen to be strapped with sacks, tools, camping gear, or even logs. One could forgive the misinterpretation that this scooped attachment was for extra storage. While it was used for storage during transport, its original function is for when the vehicle gets stuck. They're grip plates, you see. Even though the vehicle has full-time 4x4 with both high and low range settings, it still weighed in at a hefty 6 odd tons, enough for the vehicle to sink in loose sand and sloppy mud. Were this to happen, one of the crew, more than likely the driver, would hop out and unbolt the grip plates from the hull. He'd then have to separate the plates from yet more bolts until he had 2 individual grip pads that he could stuff underneath the tires, digging out trenches with the onboard E-tool for easy access if necessary. Now, it wasn't just the driver's responsibility for unsticking the vehicle. Depending on the current situation, whether the crew was safe behind friendly lines or deep behind enemy lines, at least one crewman would stay in the turret keeping situational awareness, normally the commander. One of the best parts of the Eland series is that it's highly portable, able to be loaded up into SADF C-130 cargo aircraft from bases located in South Africa to be ferried by air to controlled airports in operational areas for distribution to the various FOBs. However, regarding whether the Eland was involved in airborne combat drops, I couldn't confirm at the time of this writing. Their ability to move swiftly over tar and packed gravel surprised the enemy on multiple occasions. They were also rather silent. A quiet petrol engine enabled stealth during ambush or evasive maneuvers. Furthermore, the Eland 90 proved that it was powerful enough to defeat the heaviest armor ranged against it at that time, the Soviet T-34 85 variances that were fielded by the Cuban-backed FAPLA forces. Eland squadrons operated on the troop or platoon level in operational areas. A troop was assigned to virtually every major settlement, such as cities or towns, examples being Rukana and Katima in Angola. There were 4 Elands in a troop, and when traveling they would be in the following order: Bravo car, an Eland 60, Alpha car, an Eland 90, Charlie car, another Eland 90, and Delta car, either an Eland 60 but usually a Buffle. A Buffle, or Buffalo in English, was a modified wheeled infantry carrying vehicle, armed with a pair of .30 Browning M1919A4 machine guns, or later a 7.62 FN mag. This provided a fantastic and dynamic response team, with the 60s able to provide illumination rounds at night or smoke screens for the 2 90s to provide suppressive fire and allow the Buffle, if present, to debus and assault the enemy forces in an L-shaped response, where the bottom of the L was where the Elands would line up and suppress, while the infantry, moving to the 9 o'clock, would move to engage and destroy the threat. These patrol or recon forces operated independently, and the Eland's easy maintenance allowed them to operate on makeshift repairs for several days with adequate fuel, water, food, and ammunition carried per vehicle. The Elands struggled in Angola, often breaking down due to engine issues, as well as its squat stature proving difficult to see over the thicket and long grass that characterizes the Angolan bush. This, as well as the incessant rains between October and May, led to Elands getting stuck in the sloppy mud. This too was a problem for the T-34s that Fapler fielded. It turns out that the greatest tank of World War II, savior of the motherland, and liberator of Nazi fascism, also struggled and routinely shat itself in similar weather. Quite an apt topic considering current events. During the Angolan War, Elands developed a particularly fierce reputation amongst the Cuban-backed People's Armed Forces of Liberation of Angola, FAPLA for short. So much so that the cars were given the moniker Red Ants due to the unconventional but effective crew tactics. Though a particularly large reason why FAPLA got shafted harder than your dad was the lack of available vehicles fast enough to counter them. The Cuban general, Abelardo Colom Ibarra, I'm not sure if I'm saying right, and at this point I don't care, he's probably dead, was cited at one point saying how he struggled to combat the Eland's superior maneuverability, and was one of the greatest tactical difficulties for the Cuban FAPLA coalition in Angola. Such tactics included eyewitness accounts of Elands barging through friendly lines to get up close and personal with the rear sections of enemy armor, almost muzzle to hull in some cases, and blow a lacquer hole in the shit steel of the enemy. In such an instance, a South African paratrooper describes a standoff between an Eland and a T-34-85 during Operation Protea.
I turned to see one of our small, odd-looking Eland armored cars with its long 90mm gun barreling towards us at top speed from across the channel. It turned nimbly, kicking up clouds of dust as it came directly through our scattered lines and then turned again, this time towards the tank. The little armored car came to a quick stop in the middle of the open ground about 80 meters from the tank, waiting a couple of seconds, then firing one shot from its 90mm with a loud bang. The shot was right on target and the tank belched dense black smoke. When the smoke drifted away, the T-34's turret was lying off to one side and the open hull was burning.
Unfortunately, the Elands would find themselves being very quickly outclassed by their then newer Soviet T-54 and T-55 main battle tanks, not in terms of maneuverability or response times mind, but by thicker armor that could counter the low-pressure munitions of the Denel GT2 main cannon. Morale took a massive hit too, as Eland crews in their terrifically vulnerable vehicles had to get in close, specifically to the rear, and fire several shots to disable the tanks. Tankbreuk, or tank busting in English, expended too many 90mm Heat T, a 670-gram RDX TNT round, and a Heat TP heat tracer rounds, and fatigued the recoil systems. This also directly contradicted the then South African Armoured Cars, SAC for short, doctrine, which was to fight tanks with other tanks, specifically using the British Centurion, modified for South Africa under the new designation Olifant Mark I, or Elephant Mark I. As the conflict progressed, it was noted by the SADF review meetings that the Eland was quickly becoming antiquated and beginning to be a hindrance to operations. The Eland 90s were gradually pulled from the front, being relegated as training vehicles for the Ratel 90 crews, which incidentally used the exact same turret and gun as the Eland, but with a larger frame, better armor, while keeping similar mobility. Elands wouldn't be completely out of the fight though. Their fantastic range and high speed allowed the vehicles to be used as patrol vehicles to deter guerrilla raids and to be used as escort vehicles for either supply convoys or to escort Ratel 90s into combat. Elands would also accompany infantry operations, specifically road checkpoints, and search and destroy missions like the destruction of enemy static installations. The Eland series of vehicles has had a long and admirable service career, though quickly becoming outdated by its low pressure and lack of gyroscopically stabilized gun, as well as the enemy infantry having AP ammo for their rifles, which could pierce the thin armor to disable the vehicles. However, it is not necessarily the end of its story. certainly from the SADF and SADF's perspective, but not the rest of the world. Notably, the Beninese army, which was supplied by an unknown source in 2010, the Burkinabe army, supplied by another unknown source in 2006, the Chadian ground forces, with 87 Eland 90s and 4 Eland 60s supplied by a Belgian firm in 2007, and the Gabonese army, with 4 Eland 90s and 4 Eland 60s with the Presidential Guard. The Eland series continues to prove its worth long after its operational lifetime, and remains a popular assault gun for low-budget militaries and PMC forces looking for an easy-to-maintain, reliable, fuel-efficient, and hard-hitting weapon. Well, now it's a surprise to see you here, isn't it? Much like those Fabler forces founded when an Eland 90 just, sped up to them and fucking blasted them to fucking giblets. I'm glad you were able to stick to the end of the video, and I hope you enjoyed. I would like to start making this a running series of South African vehicles that I find really interesting. Stuff like the Olifants, the Ratels, Rooivalks, Oryxes, Pumas, etc., etc. I really hope that you enjoyed. I hope that you'll consider subscribing and liking and throwing down a comment to teach the algorithm what for. And I hope to see you next time. Thank you so much. Cheers.